Ever since I discovered a Super VHS deck that hadn't been used since before I was born in my own office closet, I've been a little obsessed with old VHS technology. I have many more subjects for future videos. Today, however, I have a full VHS Panasonic OmniMovie full VHS camcorder. Welcome back to the Deep Feature series where I pick up a thing, or multiple things, and tell you basically everything I know about them, what they do, and what they mean to me. I'm Mr. Red, and welcome back to Mellowcore. So, this is another one of the full-sized VHS camcorders that use full-sized VHS tapes. But this is the first one we've seen that wasn't made by RCA or something like that, or who actually made the previous ones was Thomson Consumer Electronics. This, however, was made by Panasonic. This specifically is the Panasonic OmniMovie PV7100. And this particular unit was actually manufactured in 1991, as you can see from the label here. April 1991 to be exact. I remember reading somewhere on this camcorder itself that it was manufactured sometime in 1988, and that's what the listing said on eBay where I got this from, so that tracks, but there are two dates on this camcorder, on the actual hardware, on the plastic on the outside, that say 1991, so I have to assume I was just wrong in making crap up. I love thinking something is one thing when it's really something else. That's great. Anyway, this was probably still designed in the late 80s. The battery situation is quite strange. This camcorder does not use the kind of batteries you might expect. I mean, okay, it would never use something like lithium batteries, like stuff does these days. But in the 80s and 90s, nickel-cadmium batteries were pretty popular. And these are pretty much the most popular portable kind of rechargeable battery standard that there was. So basically like lithium ion from the 80s. In use case anyway, not technology or science or anything. The thing is though, that there was a far more primitive type of battery that was still in heavy use in the 80s. Strong emphasis on heavy. This camcorder uses a lead acid battery. Yes, this is basically exactly like a mini car battery. It's the same battery technology. To me, this feels like one step above the Leyden jars that you would find in the 1800s. How those work is definitely completely different from lead acid batteries, but it just feels like that, okay? Inside these is a group of lead plates with some sulfuric acid taking up the space between them and around them. I'm not gonna go deep into how these work, but that's the internal layout, I'm guessing. This is the battery that came with this camcorder, and this thing is pretty heavy. Let me actually get out a scale so you can put numbers to this. Now, let me weigh the nickel-cadmium battery that I held up earlier. Yeah, much lighter. Actually, there might not be that much of a difference. I don't know, I haven't actually weighed them yet. We'll see. This battery is the AGBP20DX battery pack. No idea what the DX means. It's a 12-volt battery with 2 amp hours of capacity. That's actually 24 watt hours. This camcorder says underneath here that it uses only 10 watts. So on this battery, this would last about 2 hours, in theory. The thing is, this battery doesn't hold a charge anymore. In fact, it holds so little of a charge that the charger that came with this camcorder doesn't even register having a battery in it when I put this in it. And of course, neither does this aftermarket battery that someone must have bought with this camcorder as well after the fact. Neither of these hold charge. This is a pretty cool battery though. If I ever have a set where I can put stuff behind me, this would be high on the list to put there. I just kind of love the aesthetics of this battery. The Quasar logo, the star above the Quasar logo, just the fact that this looks like a mini ammo pack that loads into this giant camera that actually looks like a gun or something. It looks like a piece of artillery. So that's fun. I don't know if I'd call that fun, but there you go. This is again another 2 amp hour battery, but again doesn't charge, so I had to get myself a modernly manufactured battery of this type, which is this. This is a PowerStar AGM 12-2.3 CR rechargeable AGM battery. This battery is still 12 volts like the others, but it's a bit higher capacity. 2.3 amp hours instead of just 2. So that makes this a 12 watt-hour battery.
What?
I even had in the script 17 watt-hours. Oh my god, it said it wrong again. It's 27 watt-hours. What am I doing? I'm sorry guys, I actually meant 27 watt-hours. So in this camcorder, it would last about 2.5 hours. And that's pretty good. And in my testing, it seems to last that long. And this one's even heavier. I mean, it's bigger, of course it's gonna be heavier. So I'm gonna compare that against the nickel cadmium battery that I weighed a second ago. I don't know what these figures are gonna look like, but if it's anything like my expectations, this is probably gonna be maybe 0.3 times heavier. No wait, 1.3 times heavier. So confusing. The only problem is, well, it's longer than the batteries meant for this camcorder. It doesn't look like by much, but it is. And nothing demonstrates this better than putting this in the camcorder, which you have to put in a certain orientation. Yeah. That's it all the way in, by the way. You can hear the camera starting up, but as soon as I let go, it pops up and the camera loses power. So yeah, the battery does slide in and it'll run the camera, but as soon as I pick it up or bump it or try to record with it, it will pop right out. And that's because there's a spring in here that, you know, pushes up on the battery so that the battery eject can work. But the battery eject lever actually actuates something that catches on these catches here inside this mechanism. So if you put the normal batteries that are supposed to come with this camcorder in here, they will go in and stay in there because the spring won't be able to push them up because of the catches. And the battery eject simply moves the catches back and allows the force from the spring to force the battery up out of the camcorder for you to grab it. And the problem with that is, on the long one, is that, well, the catches are all the way up here and they need to be, you know, down where they are on the normal batteries for this to work. So I resorted to just duct taping the side of the camcorder, and by extension, when I put a battery in, I just fold the tape over the battery to have it be clamped in by the duct tape. And this does work. And I'm doing this so that I don't have to make like a backpack that we saw in the previous episode, or have to carry around my little power thing. Wow, that was a lot about the power situation. But we're not done here, because this is the camera's adapter. This is the accurate word to describe what this does, actually. Because this isn't just a power brick, and it isn't just a battery charger. However, batteries do go on here very goober-like. In fact, I even have to do this with this large battery because of a problem I'll discuss later. But yeah, this is kind of like how the first mobile phones from Motorola, like the first cell phones, charged. You just display them on this cradle that would actually charge them, and that would be the charger. Super, super stupidly weird. I'm sure there's some science to why this is like this. Maybe because they're like the fluid in this battery, the electrons need to go specific places, and like maybe there needs to be a deficit of electrons here, and like all the positive stuff goes here. I'm not gonna look it up. I'll let you guys do that, but that's my theory with knowing nothing about it. But how do you get power into the camcorder? There's no DC jack on this brick. I'm gonna kick that out before it falls out. But yeah, there's no DC jacks on this thing anywhere, so how does this plug into the camcorder? Well, it's this permanently attached cable coming out of the power brick, which is not the same one that goes to the wall. There is one that goes to the wall, and then right above it, there's this one, which is a proprietary adapter C manual cable, which plugs into the adapter C manual port on the back of the camcorder. This is actually how you use the I/O jacks on this adapter as well. And more accurately, it's actually called adaptor. I don't know what the difference is, but there must be some. And yes, I'm calling this the adapter C manual plug because, well, that's what it says here, and the C manual is not in parentheses. Hey, that's what it's labeled as. Shut up. So that's how you do that. So now you can plug the adapter into the wall, and if this is going to the camcorder, it should get power. I'm just an idiot, so I didn't plug the adapter in. Stupid. You're stupid. There we go. Yes. And once you've done so, a little power light will light up. You might also hear some clicking, which I didn't put in the script, but yeah, that's a bit weird. What I find really stupid about this though is that this doesn't charge the battery in place, even though you can have the camcorder battery in the camcorder and have the DC current, plugged in here. This won't charge the battery, which to me is a missed opportunity, and they really should have done that. That's not all this adapter can do though. It seems to be able to convert between any RF and composite signals. RF is like 90s HDMI for SD broadcast TV. Audio, video, and probably some other junk that I don't know of. It's the consumer antenna connection, and a lot of TVs in the 80s didn't have video input, and those that got one were probably RF anyway. I think this is just called an F connector, but I don't like that term, and this is actually labeled. Actually, it's not labeled as anything. The closest label says AC in, but I know that's not right. But over here on the switch, it actually is labeled RF, and I'll talk about that. So when you have the camcorder connected to this thing, you can connect this to your TV by setting the input select switch on the front to the camera setting, and then connect the RF connector to your TV's antenna input if it only has that, or its composite jacks if it has that as well. Using RF requires it to put the input into a channel that you have to tune into on the TV. So this switch switches between which channel you're doing that for. Channel 3 or channel 4, or off, which I don't know why you'd set it to that. Wouldn't that just turn off the RF functionality to begin with? I'm not sure why it has an off function. I'm also sure there's reasons why that it can only do channels 3 and 4, why those are the only options. I'm also not sure why it's a switch to begin with. I mean, wouldn't it just put it on channel 3 or 4? Like, why does it have to have both on here? That's just weird. Again, I'm sure there's a reason, I just don't know it. If you set the input select on the front to line, that reverses the scheme, so it'll actually send the video and audio to the camcorder instead of the camcorder sending video and audio out of this. And that allows you to use this camcorder as basically a VHS deck with limited features. Pretty neat. You might also think that this adapter would include S-Video somewhere as well, which it really doesn't. But this was 1991, and S-Video wasn't really a thing yet in 1991, and this is not a Super VHS camcorder, obviously, and S-Video is pretty much limited to Super VHS equipment at the time. That's more of a late 90s thing. Oh, and this thing was actually called the Panasonic Video AC Adapter, which is a pretty good description of what this does. It even says it on the front of the thing. This camcorder system only supports mono audio, of course, since base VHS didn't have stereo audio. On the video end though, there is one improvement this camcorder does in fact have, and that is called VHS High Quality, as you can see on the side. This adds 10 more horizontal lines of VHS quality. Seems pretty minimal, but this has it, and the tapes can still be played back in typical VHS players. On that note, if you want to know why these huge things existed when much smaller and better camcorders existed by far in 1991, you can watch my first video on the subject. It's the 9-minute one. There was definitely a manual sold with this unit, as many aspects of this machine and even its adapter beg you to read it. But I don't have it, and I'm not going to pay $5 for it until I start Patreon or something, as I'm trying to save money here. So I can only tell you so much about the features. Anyway, let's take a simple look around the 7100. On one side, there's Panasonic with OmniMovie VHS HQ. Above that seems to be a removed property sticker. Yours likely won't come with that though. You'll have to reduce the outwards appearance of your camcorder on your own accord. Next to that tells us that the unit has autofocus. Thank God for that. And 12x zoom. On the other side, there's another AF 12x badge, another Panasonic, and a push here label that has a few little bumpies around it. There's also a 2.5mm remote jack and a 3.5mm mono headphone jack. And yes, you can plug your normal headphones into this. However, it'll only be on like one side because, well, it's a mono headphone jack and quite loud. Also, that jack was actually meant for a crystal earpiece, and this is what one of those looks like. On the bottom, there's a typical tripod socket. Make sure your tripod is rated for 10,000 pounds. Right below that, there's the serial number and date of manufacture. which as previously discussed is April 1991. Below that, on the padded shoulder place, is way too much electrical caution stuff. This thing is not that dangerous to open, come on. On the top of the 7100, there's the viewfinder pod, a cold shoe mount for like lights and accessories and stuff, the handle, and the battery compartment with the battery eject switch button. And there's nothing on the back except for some text that yours probably won't come with and the adapter port. On the front is the mono microphone with a wind buffer switch on one side of it and an external microphone port on the other. Yes, you don't have to be stuck with the trashy built-in mic. You can also use this as basically just an audio in jack, but to use it like that, you have to really finely tune and adjust the amplification of the signal that you're sending in there, or else it just gets completely blown out and distorted, or it's just way too quiet. Oh, and the wind buffer, one of the things that it seems to do is basically filter out lower frequencies. So if you want better audio in a normal situation, best to leave the mic on normal mode.
Over.
The mic is the lens, which is a 12x optical zoom lens at f1.6. That's a good lens. The cap actually has more thought put into it than a lot of things do nowadays, of course. You can take it off, but it's still attached with the string that goes back to the camcorder, so you can't lose it, which can get annoying as it bangs onto stuff, you know, it's just how it is. But the cap has two spiky things that kind of come out of the center of the cap, and they can latch onto the bottom of the handle on this camcorder. And with this, you can actually set the camera down and it'll still stay upright and the cap just hangs out there. Then you pick it up and it stays on there. That's pretty cool. To turn the unit on, slide this power switch button back. And if the unit has power, you should see a red power LED light up next to the power text. And if you're under 30 years old or so, hear the sound of an old CRT tube TV, the high-pitched whine. This is because the viewfinder on here is once again exactly what it sounds like, a tiny black and white CRT display. The viewfinder contraption pod on the 7100 is quite a bit different than previous camcorders we've looked at. This viewfinder CRT circuitry is still built into here, but the microphone is somewhere else and there's no lamp on the 7100. This pod swings in and out for either use or storage. You can also pull the viewfinder's cup out a little bit, making it stick out more and exposing this weird little tube thing. I don't know why, but specifically this tube feels cheaper than anything else. Not that that actually matters. The mirror setup is inside this section that pulls out as well. On the neck of the eye cup here is a physical focus ring for the viewfinder. I think this is called the diopter or something. I don't know. There's controls on this pod as well. There's a brightness dial, which is a simple potentiometer with a dial on it. But the electronic focus control is a potentiometer that you need to poke and turn with the screwdriver. In a diagonal way? The hell is that? On the side of the 7100, there's a large dial that defaults on the normal camera mode, but on either end of it are auto lock camera mode and VCR playing mode. Normal mode is just for normal shooting, but I can't figure out what auto lock does. It just seems to stop my recording after a few seconds. On the front, inside this trigger handle, are the very slow zoom controls, and in the middle, a red record button. So we turned it on, but how do you use it? Well, you shoulder it, and it's actually not that uncomfortable, at least to me. And I recommend setting the wind buffer on if you're outside, like at all. But if you're inside or it's like not windy at all, and you just know that, well, you should just set it to normal. This camcorder has a CCD just like every camcorder in the late 80s and 90s, so the image quality isn't going to be that bad. Here's some test footage.
So, you want to get you food first? Because you would need to bring a drink.
Yeah.
Which you didn't last time.
Well, I have a drink down in the place, so I'm gonna go get that.
You also left a glass of water in my office yesterday.
Yes, I did.
Oh, you're looking at my butt?
I'm gonna go wash my hands.
Razor blade editing technique is that it's the simplest, most fundamental way to interact with a linear medium. But it was also a huge pain in the ass. Known in cassette deck in their heyday probably dubbed it taking some slow.
Here's the Funair.
Did you put the music on?
Yeah. A shitter speed of 500. Oh yeah.
I thought that said laundry sack.
You're a laundry sack. Where? Coming soon? Hi, so this is how the mic sounds normally. It might be peaking, I don't really know, because I'm kind of talking directly into the camera, but this is the microphone on normal audio mode. So let's change it to wind filter and see what changes. So now the mic is on wind buffer mode. I'm still waking up. And the microphone, if I'm correct about this, it should be filtering out the lower frequencies, so you shouldn't hear the deepness of my voice as much, but if I put it back on normal, you can really tell my voice is deep right now because I am tired. Bye-bye. Fixed for indoor lighting. And now fixed for outdoor lighting. then back to auto. Actually, I made a brief error in the script. This is not a toggle backlight button, this is just a press backlight button, so you have to hold it down. So you have to hold it down the entire duration of when you want to use it. Whoopsie. This is just a test recording. It's not showing some of the UI elements on the output of the camera here, so I'm sorry. So I'm going to have to show you the original tape for those on-screen elements like recording and stuff. So right now it's just a rec for recording. Actually, you won't see that. Actually, you won't see that on the tape either. So sorry about that. Can't show you that, but it says recording for me, and everything else seems to appear on the external display. So okay. This one seems to have some manual controls, but not quite as much as the CC320 of the previous episode. Starting with the focus controls, here's a similar set of kit to what appeared for this function on the last episode. This is a button and a switch, but not in a bad way. In manual mode, it acts as a button. If you press it, it will autofocus for as long as you're holding it down. This is pretty useful if you have a lot of issues when shooting with autofocus and just want it very briefly. While in this mode, you can use the manual focus wheel located all the way on the top for focusing. However, if you want autofocus all the time, you can simply hold down the button, then slide it over to the auto setting, which engages with a hold internally that keeps it pressed down in that position. I've seen this like 3 times, but this always seems to be like a genius solution for this. Next we have the fade button. This is something you do have to hold down, and if you do, and wait like 5 seconds, the signal will fade to silver, if you're looking through the viewfinder anyway, which looks pretty funky. But on the tape, the color picture is faded out until you let the button go, at which point the picture will start very annoyingly slowly fading back in. Really, it takes like 15 seconds for it to come back to full brightness. Now we have the white balance control, which as you can see with this test footage I shot, goes from a fixed setting for indoor 1991 lighting, so like incandescent lighting, to daylight, with an auto setting in the middle that honestly, you should only be using that one. Next, we have one of my favorite controls, because it makes the footage from any camcorder look so much better, given the lighting allows for proper use of it. This is the high-speed shutter control switch. That's also a button. Oh well. If you press it downwards, it changes the shutter speed to 125. I'm assuming the auto setting picks 60 most of the time. I don't really know. 60 isn't that great if your picture is moving though. Higher shutter speeds help a lot with blurriness and movement artifacts in video. For example, if you want your 4K 60 footage to look like it's 4K 60, you set it to a shutter speed higher than 60. Anyway, this is pretty handy for this type of format, VHS, because you only have so much quality to work with at all. Going from 125 shutter speed to 250 if you press the switch again, the moving image looks even cleaner than it did before. You can whip this camera around as you're recording and the image should stay fairly solid and smooth. However, if you press it again, it changes to 500, then 1000, then 2000, and finally to 4000. Each one even smoother and more responsive than the last. But there's a problem. You can't do many of these at low light. I mean, sure, you can activate these settings in low light, but unless you're near a window that's blasting sunlight into your room, or you're like really outdoors in sunny weather, the image quality will be greatly reduced. And that's because of how shutter speed actually works. More shutter speed equals less time for each sample of the image, and less time generally means less light. So the image decreases in brightness as well as the quality, the higher you go in shutter speed. In sunlight though, this is very usable, and doesn't seem to decrease the picture quality one bit. Next is actually a button that fixes a problem that I mentioned in my previous videos, which is usually called the backlight problem. Now that sounds a little misleading, so here's what that means. Backlight in this case is referring to the background of a subject being much brighter than your subject is. Like if you're trying to record someone but they're standing in front of a window or a bright light. They are backlit. No camera can deal with this properly on auto mode, except your phone. Your subject is going to be very dark no matter what, but there's 2 solutions for this. Well, actually 3, but I just mentioned the other one and I'm not going to entertain that. First would be to just crank up the total exposure of the image manually so that you get your subject above all else, blowing out everything else behind them. This is what I usually do with modern cameras. The second solution is to basically have a button that does exactly the same thing, which is what this is. Next are the date and time controls. You can press the date and time button to overlay the date and time onto your recording, as seen here. If the date is incorrect, you can go and change it by pressing the clock controls across from the button Select and Set. Select changes which section of the date and time is selected, and Set changes the parameters of said selected section. When you press the select button at the last section of the date and time, the whole thing now becomes stable on the screen again, saving your date and time setting. I don't know how it actually keeps track of any of this, if it does at all, because I can't find a clock battery anywhere, and of course I don't have and can't find a manual. In A Land Down Under, there's a rec review button, which I had some problems with. Yeah, rec review doesn't seem to do anything right now. Yeah, rec review seems to be kind of broken. What this is supposed to do is rewind to the beginning of the last time you hit record and then play just that section of the tape. But for me, on all the VHS camcorders I've had that can do this, it only rewinds about 3 to 6 seconds and plays that, which I don't see a legitimate use for at all. So I have to assume this is just either a broken function of all of these, or it was just fraud. Let me know in the comments if you know better. The word down here, on the streets tonight as well, are the canter controls. This is for turning the camcorder into a weapon from Counter-Strike so you can canter an oncoming videographer attack. Wait, no. These are for the built-in hours, minutes, and seconds counter for how long you've recorded, and how much time you've got left on the tape to record with, which, as you can see in this clip, somehow it knows this even after I've decimated the counter by pressing the R button, setting everything to 0. Does that actually tell me how long? That really does seem to tell me how much more time I have left on the tape, which 15 minutes, based on how much tape looks like there's left in the cassette, looks about right. I don't know how it's doing that because I reset the counter about 5 minutes ago, and I shot the rest of this tape long before then, so I'm not sure how it can determine this when I've already reset the thing, but whatever. Anyway, one of these two buttons switches between different schemes of counting and courses of displaying it. Next is, well, a control I actually missed before, which is the time-lapse button, but, I would tell you what the time-lapse / self-timer button does, but I don't have the manual, and when I press it, it doesn't actually do anything, so I guess we'll never know what that does. By the way, here's some raw audio from the microphone here, straight to a computer, with the wind filter off. So you can hear the deepness of my voice, and hopefully when I turn it on to wind filter, you shouldn't be able to hear as much deep stuff in my voice. If it's doing what I think it's doing, which it probably is, because I'm usually right. And now the deepness again. Okay, now for the transport controls on the top of this unit. Set the camcorder dial into VCR playing mode to use these. However, I think this one will still let you use some of them in camera mode. Don't quote me on that though. First is pause / still, which is actually a pause button, even though this isn't a high-end camcorder, which contradicts many things I said in the previous episodes. Then we have the rewind and search button. I have no idea what search is supposed to do, unless it's just a synonym for rewind, but that does the same thing on everything, although in this camcorder seems to have its fastest rewind speed slower than the rest of the camcorders in this series thus far. Next is play, which is play. This also stops any rewind or fast forward action, which is the next button. This also has the label of search. Across a bit from those is another record button and the stop / eject button. The stop eject button stops the tape transport and unthreads it from the VHS mechanism in the camcorder. And if you press it again, ejects the tape after doing something else mechanical. It ejects with some insert fancy word here. However, it's not as cool as the CC320 was from the previous episode. The record button though is much more interesting. VHS camcorders were extremely expensive in their glory days, the mid to late 80s, and even in the early 90s. They still cost over $1,000, but why? Well, VHS VCRs were actually still kind of expensive at this time, and this is basically a camcorder married to one of those, so it's not going to be cheap naturally. So then, it would be quite awesome if you could use this camera as a normal VCR and just pipe video into it from your TV or something and record tapes with it like that, as well as taking it out of the house to record in camera mode. This camcorder does have that functionality, as we saw on the dock from earlier. This record button simply takes the signal from that adapter when it's plugged into the camcorder and makes the internal VCR mechanism in the camera record that signal. That's all it does. It doesn't even work in camera mode. Something I do want to mention, because it was a little bit useful to me, is that the lens isn't near the bottom of the unit like it is on a lot of vintage camcorders. It's near the top, which allows me to, when in a car, not struggle as much when gathering footage from inside the car of the outside world. So the question becomes, do you want one of these? And the answer is generally yes, but also no. These camcorders use outdated media, the microphone is crap, it uses very outdated battery technology that you'll have to replace like every freaking few months if you use these regularly, and the VHS mechanism in here is actually falling apart. And these problems plague pretty much all full-size VHS camcorders. This one isn't doing as bad as some are, but I had problems getting the second half of this video done because of how just old it is, and the falling apartness of it. Here's me having to go in and make the video head drum spin again, because for some reason it wasn't spinning up. I got in and spun it around myself to hopefully get it unstuck, and I did end up fixing it. After I recorded the rest of the video though, I heard something rattling around inside when I took it off a tripod, so I ejected the tape door and shook whatever it was out. As it turns out, it's this little piece of white plastic that looks kinda like a tooth. And of course, I have no idea where it came from. These are really falling apart, and I don't want to mislead anyone into blowing $100 on one of these, or two of these, or in my case, 6 of these. Just be careful. These are older than they ever have been. Something else I also want to mention is the Panasonic was actually rebranded by Sears and sold in their stores. It might have also been rebranded by other companies as well, but I don't really know of them. I'm very sure it was in Sears though. RIP Sears. Wow, I'm really good at saving all of the depression for the end of these videos, aren't I? Sorry this video took so long. I went through a breakup in the past week actually, and I've been trying to keep busy and also get out of the house more. This thing also kept giving me issues. Not many, but enough to delay the video even further. I do, by the way, have a VHS-C RCA camcorder coming to me from eBay, and the seller told me it works, so I'm hoping to be able to use these tapes that I got like last year and show you a little bit about VHS-C camcorders, because they're pretty interesting, and to be honest, they show some lineage to this camcorder, believe it or not. They also seem to have a lot more features than these do, which is kind of odd, because you know, these ones are big, they could put a lot more stuff in these, but they just didn't. They tended to put a lot more stuff in the smaller camcorders. So contrary to what I said before, this series is not over, but it's almost over. That means this is likely the last full-sized VHS camcorder to appear on the series for quite a long time, because, well, the other camcorders I've had, or have right now, they're just not working. This one's broken, and this one's broken, and the guy that sold me this actually sold it to me broken, and I can't fix it. And this one was broken in the same way, and I also can't fix it. I did try, as this empty shell would suggest. Let me show you what was inside this. This is what happens when you go a little bit too far into the shell. I don't think I broke anything further, but this definitely still doesn't work. Sad? Wait, no, I'm not sad. This stuff is supremely cool, and I'm really glad I got a chance to show you all about them. This has been Mr. Ed from Metalcore Media, and thanks for watching. Subscribe for more, good night, and have fun.